Hello, welcome. If you're joining today, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name and how old your students are. If you're with your student today, where you're zooming in from. I'm here with
Tiana?
three of our mentors and former mentor team member Jules. You guys can all introduce yourself in the chat, say your name, where you're zooming in from, but we'll be doing proper introductions very soon. I want to know where cats are the best is zooming in from. But please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and thank you all so much for being here today. Welcome, everyone joining. Hello. We're going to be starting shortly, so feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We love to know where folks are zooming in from. Across the globe, Micah. Amazing. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll be starting momentarily. Welcome. As you join, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll be getting started very shortly. We have people zooming in from LA to Shanghai to Jacksonville, Florida. As you join, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share where you're zooming in from. We got some New York present. Okay, Jules, let's kick it off. Thank you all so much for being here today. We're grateful to have you. And as I was just talking about with our panelists, this is a very busy time because August 1st, the Common App opened for rising seniors. 1 week from today, we reopened the FlightPlan, our platform that helps high schoolers navigate the college admissions journey. And today you're all here with us. We have folks of all grades and ages, but we're going to be talking about telling your story as it pertains to college. Let's dive in. I'm going to be introducing our amazing mentors. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to questions from anyone in the group and wrap it up from there. So a little bit about our background. I'm Audrey Wisch. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Curious Cardinals. I started Curious Cardinals 6 years ago when I was a student at Stanford. I was a history major who thought I was pre-law with my 10-year life plan set and aspirations to be the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then the pandemic hit and Stanford sent us home. I started tutoring kids online, and working with those students observed they were disengaged and uninspired. They were absorbing and regurgitating what they read in a textbook, but they didn't know why it mattered. So that inspired me to apply what they were learning in school to their interests, their passions, the world around them. One of them asked for math help. I was not as passionate about math, so I called Alec. Alec was an aerospace engineer at Stanford who loved math, and instead of drilling math equations, Alec showed them how math makes airplanes fly. And suddenly the student wasn't just learning the math, he felt genuinely connected to it. And that's when we realized there was a real magic to the near-peer, passion-based, project-based learning model. Curious Cardinals began as a pandemic passion project. It's 6 years later. We are now a roster of over 1,000 college and grad student mentors. Our mentors are presidents of clubs, winners of awards, Rhodes Scholar. They're truly the most talented young people. You'll get to hear from 3 amazing ones of them today. Working with students all over to help them find their passion. A lot of this through passion-based, project-based learning. We also help students prepare for their future. So our goal is to help people find their purpose and the path to get there. And so more recently, we just launched a new platform called the FlightPlan, which helps high schoolers navigate their high school journey in preparation for the college process. So that's a little bit about where we started and what we do at Curious Cardinals. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have 3 amazing panelists here today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, share who they are, their background, what they mentor in, and then we're going to dive right into it. So take it away, Nala.
Super nice to meet you guys. My name is Nala, and I'm a graduate of Harvard of the class of 2025, where I studied in our integrated social studies honors program with a focus on social innovation and had a minor in mind, brain, and behavior, which is fancy talk for neuroscience and psychology. This past year, I've been living in Mexico City as a Fulbright Binational Business Fellow, working at an entrepreneurship center to help students scale their dreams. And over my time in high school, I really concentrated my time as a UN youth rep. And in college, I had the opportunity to continue working in the global education space as the president of Harvard Model Congress, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that operates educational programming in over 35 countries. And with that, I will hand it off to our next mentor.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. It's nice to meet you. My name is Micah. I'm a rising junior at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, where I study history, political science, as well as intensive education studies. I'm originally from a super small town in North Carolina. It's called Walberg, like a million bonus points if you've ever heard of it. This summer, I'm actually in Shanghai right now. I'm attending an international relations conference, but I was in New York interning at the UN. And as Nala was speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, we have so many parallels, so many things in common. So similar to Harvard Model Congress, I'm the president of the Yale International Relations Association, which is very similar, also a nonprofit 501c3. And we focus on high school model United Nations conferences across the world. And so that's actually why I'm here in Shanghai. Super excited to talk to you guys more and learn from each other.
Hi guys, nice to meet you. My name is Zoe. I graduated from Northwestern University in 2024, and there I double majored in theater and neuroscience. While I was there, I also served as artistic director of Seesaw Theater, which created theater that was specifically for children and individuals with autism. I was also founder and president of Project Sunshine, and that was a program that offered play and music programming to children at Lurie Children's Hospital. After I graduated, I spent a year in Brazil doing research on a Fulbright grant, and what I was studying was adapting theater of the oppressed, which was a socio-political artistic movement that took place to combat Brazil's military dictatorship. And what I was doing was using it to develop curriculums to help children with autism combat bullying. I recently presented that research at Princeton and NYU, and now I work as a professional actor and educator in NYC, doing disability justice and also using the arts to spread scientific knowledge, specifically wildlife education and conservation.
So if you can't tell, our mentors are extraordinarily accomplished and very talented and so inspiring. But what really is always most resonant about our mentors is it's very, very authentic. And that's very much our belief when we talk about college at Curious Cardinals. There was a while where we stayed away from college because our mission has always been cultivating authentic passion and curiosity in kids. And a lot of the college business and college counselors and organizations out there we saw felt antithetical to that. So when we leaned into helping with college more directly as we do today, it's the utmost priority and our greatest value to make sure that curiosity, passion, authenticity is never lost in that process. So that leads me to my first question, which I would love to hear from each of you. How did you find out what you loved? Take us back perhaps to ninth grade. What did that early journey look like for you? To kind of now we've heard so many amazing things about where you're at today. Where were you at as perhaps a rising ninth grader?
I
For
can
sure.
kick it off. Oh,
Oh, we're gonna go
here.
through Nala, take it away.
Oh,
And again, you can talk through starting in ninth grade to like what you did extracurricularly throughout.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to kick us off, and I'm sure Micah and I have many similarities. But I came into ninth grade completely and totally lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do, not only during my time in high school, but in my professional life. I hadn't had much exposure to career paths outside of doctor, lawyer, and maybe engineer. So I wanted to take my high school experience and take that time to really explore. So I jumped on every opportunity. I went to every club meeting. I had notoriously a best friend who one day was like, I'm going to Model UN, you should come. And I went to that club meeting with her. And ultimately, by the end of my time in high school, I'd become Model UN president. So I think that just goes to show the more kind of random little things that you immerse yourself in, the more of a chance you'll have to find something that actually really sticks. So my journey started with activities in skill building, like Model UN in theater, and quickly evolved into real applications into how I could use those skills to bring about change in the real world. So at the bottom right here, you'll see a picture of me on a field trip to Alabama with the Equal Justice Initiative, where we did a civil rights trek essentially throughout Alabama and looked at a number of historical sites, and then did continuous advocacy work with the Equal Justice Initiative that focuses on reducing mass incarceration. So from that one trip, I really discovered my love of advocacy, especially in both the nonprofit and political space. And from there, you'll see this is kind of, this wall of posters was what my senior year room looked like. I'd worked on at least like 5 different presidential campaigns. I'd worked with a number of nonprofits, and from kind of that little kernel that or that little seed that was planted with the Equal Justice Initiative, I knew that that was what my passion was and where that passion lied. And while it started with a single issue, which was mass incarceration, it soon grew to evolve a number of national and global issues. So while I started with the Equal Justice Initiative, I then collaborated with the ACLU to create and pursue research projects focused on racial equity in education. And from there, I took those findings to become a national youth rep with the NGO side of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women to advocate for equity in education for women of color specifically. So you'll see me there. Also the first time ever at the UN on the civil society side. And yeah, so that was a little bit about my journey. Essentially, the moral of the story is I started by going to a bunch of random things, found a manner of applying my skills that really stuck, and then found a bunch of avenues, both in and outside of school, to then explore those passions. And with that, I will pass it off to our next mentor.
Yes, for sure. So I totally had, it's kind of ironic, the exact same Model UN experience. It was my freshman year of high school. It was still COVID. Things were weird. The interest meeting was on Zoom and I almost didn't go. And one of my friends was like, no, like do it. Like the advisor, the teacher is so amazing. And so I did. And from there, it's kind of bloomed into this thing that has been a really incredible journey over the past 6 years. And I think just as Nala said, that goes to show like when you're young, like dip your toes into everything, try it because you truly have no clue what's going to stick. And some of the things that you don't think are going to stick are going to be the things that stick with you for, decades afterwards. But something I'll talk about with all these pictures on the screen is I was super involved in high school band and marching band and orchestra. This started actually back in 6th grade. So truly, it's never too early to begin looking for kind of what you're interested in. So my middle school, they pitched it as you can play an instrument or you can join chorus. And still to this day, I cannot sing if my life depended on it. So kind of left me with one option, and that was to play an instrument. So I picked up the trumpet. Wasn't that great at it, but I really liked it, and I really loved the people that were in my band class. Those are actually still my best friends to this day, even as we've all gone to different colleges. I had a really amazing band director, and so I kind of just found myself in a community that even though at first I wasn't super great at what I was doing, the people around me kind of were empowering me and uplifting me. And that led all the way to my senior year. So actually all of these pictures I'm now realizing are from my senior year. You can see a mix of like North Carolina All-State Band, a lot of it's marching band. And so it was this really, really kind of unique journey of joining something that I really didn't have interest in, wasn't great at, barely play 5 notes on the trumpet. And then it led to eventually going towards leadership positions, like being drum major of the marching band, and then earning a spot at the North Carolina All-State Band Conference. And so, like I said, if I could reiterate, like try everything. You totally never know what's going to stick. And also just, make sure that you're in communities that empower you, because that's what led me to all these places.
And last but not least, Zoe.
Yeah, my high school did not have Model UN, so I didn't do Model UN, but that sounds great. So yeah, going into 9th grade, I pretty much knew 2 things, and that was that I was a pretty good singer and that I was like pretty smart maybe. And so I enrolled in a performing arts high school, and I just kind of went like pedal to the metal on the choir thing. I was singing every day. I ended up doing all-state choir, all-Eastern choir. I was invited to perform and sing backup at Carnegie Hall a couple times for like Tori Kelly and Colby Calais. Like if I was in the choir room every single day, which was absolutely amazing. But I also knew that I loved science and I loved everything that had to do with STEM and all of that good stuff. And I felt a lot of pressure. I kind of was told two things. I was like, I'm going to be on Broadway. And people were like, you're too smart. Don't be an actor. Or I would have my performing arts teachers telling me, you're spending too much time studying. Don't worry about all of that. Like, all you need to worry about is how well you can read music, how good of a singer you are, how good of a dancer you are, etc. So I really felt like I was being pulled in many different directions. And basically, people were telling me that I needed to pick one or the other, and that I needed to make that decision essentially when I was 14 years old. And what's really, really interesting about that, if you look at the bottom left, that was me volunteering at this organization called Act Out New Jersey, which did free music, dance, and acting classes for individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism. And what's actually really interesting is that that type of work using the arts for autism advocacy is what I did essentially for my Fulbright. So when I was 13, 14, volunteering at this organization, it was already setting me up to find my passion and to be able to combine both my love for science and my love for the arts. I'm actually going to be a bridesmaid in one of my fellow volunteers' weddings, so you never know. Sometimes you meet somebody when you're 13 and you end up being friends with them for life. But one thing that I really want to stress is that you can be into multiple things, and that is totally okay. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't find a way to combine those interests. So, when you're a rising ninth grader, even all throughout high school, even all throughout college for that matter, don't pigeonhole yourself saying, I'm a music person, or I'm an academia person, or I'm a sports person, because then you're selling yourself short and you're really denying yourself opportunities to combine all of your passions and really pursue excellence that way.
Love it. So much goodness. Thank you all for all that you shared. So let's get a little bit more specific, because I think that this first phase of figuring out what you love and then narrowing down and doing all the amazing things and receiving the type of recognition you receive, that's the part that can feel a little ambiguous for people. And so I like to bring this back to one of my favorite quotes. I quote Steve Jobs all the time. I'm even in our product of FlightPlan saying this, which Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I think Zoe, the work you do, the intersection of disability activism with theater, like that's such a perfect intersection of, it's really hard at the onset to kind of contrive and manufacture that, but you find your ways in these niche areas and they weave themselves together pretty organically. I love to hear if you guys could speak about that. The other prism to think about it through is I like to tell families that ninth grade is the year, sample, try everything, throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and then you do have to make some hard decisions, and that's part of growing up. So I'll leave it up to you guys there's a lot there that I'd love to unpack and get a little bit more tactical here.
Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. I think ninth grade, I was involved in many, many other things than what I mentioned. I was in Junior Statesman of America and the debate team and Shakespeare Club. And I was also really performing in the school musicals, doing pre-college programs, things like that. And as I sort of progressed through high school, I really did realize, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day. But again, I was getting that feedback literally from teachers. I had a teacher, one of my performing arts teachers, say, all these music schools, they don't care about your grades. So it is a better use of your time to practice or rehearse or do a show as opposed to study. And I cannot emphasize enough, as much as I love and respect this teacher and how much like amazing things they contributed to my journey, that's not true. Don't pigeonhole yourself too early. Now is the time to sample. Did I end up going and, becoming a professional debater? No, I did not. But that Junior Statesman of America experience really exposed me to a lot of political causes that I ended up being really, really passionate about. It also taught me how to public speak and debate and taught me about rhetoric really, really well. And had I not had those skills, I might have not been able to write a compelling Fulbright application or something like that. So even if you don't end up pursuing something full time, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an immense amount of value that adds to your journey and to your story.
Totally. I mean, I'm sure I know Nala has a similar story of her, but like I'd love to, again, even a little bit more tactical. Like, what was that experience of going from doing all the things to having the reckoning of I need to do fewer things and making that decision?
I'm happy to add a little bit there. And as I was listening to you, Zoe, it reminded me of something I heard from an advisor actually in college when I was writing my thesis grant proposals, which is strongly held loose commitments. Which essentially means everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing, you should truly believe and have some passion for in your heart. But as a ninth grader specifically, those commitments should be very loose. You know, leave yourself some room to explore, to move around. Don't get married to an idea of a future or a career in that first year because things can change. And you want to make sure that you have an open mind and are able to receive whatever opportunities come your way. So that's ninth grade. And then what? You've done all these things that you're passionate about. You have your heart in a billion different places. How do you decide? And this is a story I shared last time, which I'll also share briefly here about something I call the 3 a.m. test. So this came about for me because I was this ninth grader who was doing these things. I was in debate and Model UN and theater and also starting to get involved in advocacy. And I was just staying up really late every night. And I'm someone who loves my sleep dearly, and you might love other things. You could love ice cream, you could love going on runs with your friends. And I just realized that if I wanted to do all these things, I would have to sacrifice something I loved deeply. And that became my metric. So it became, what would I be willing to sacrifice for? And that would tell me as kind of an internal indicator how much I loved something. So I asked myself, would I stay up past 3 a.m. for this like all week long? And if the answer was yes, I knew that that was not only a deeply, a strong conviction with a loose commitment, but something that I could genuinely see myself committing to in the long run. For me, it's worked really, really well. And I think if you can identify your personal values as kind of this guideline, whether that value is I'm going to sleep really well every night, or if that value is something else, I would totally encourage you to take some time to reflect on what is important to you. And sometimes those are kind of those shortcut ways to make really, really tough decisions.
Yeah. So this idea of doing fewer things, but doing those fewer things really deep and going deep and like doing things that actually move the needle. I was not great at in high school, and I didn't truly realize the value of that, of really just following what you love and not trying to create this perfect, well-rounded in every single way version of yourself. Didn't realize that until college. And I think the perfect example of that is I remember so vividly that my first year of high school, um, and for context, I am totally not the most athletic person in the world. But I told myself going into my freshman year, like, oh, you have to play a sport because when you apply to college, if they don't see that you like haven't maxed out every single thing and you're not this perfect rounded circle, your application is going in the trash. Totally not true. Just what I was telling myself. So I joined the tennis team, and I did it all 4 years, and I loved it, and I made great friends. It wasn't my favorite thing. Um, do I think it helped me get into Yale or any other college? Nope. I really don't think so, especially after talking to like my admissions officer, to be quite frank. Um, and so I think I finally learned, okay, like life is not about being this perfectly rounded circle. Like you want to have like spikes, or like you've gone deep into something or one or two things specifically and actually made an impact. And I realized that once I got to Yale, and I think even more so than high school, when you're at a university, there's so many opportunities. And they're just like throwing these opportunities and trips and clubs and extracurriculars at you. And it's like, you just want to say yes. And one of the hardest things I've ever done is turning those down because it just feels wrong. But at the extracurricular bazaar, I think my first or second week at university, I walked past the club tennis team and just had to keep walking because I was like, you know what? That was in the past. That was a great thing you did in high school, but it's not what you love. It's not what you care about, and it's not how you're going to make an impact. And so totally 100% like listen to all these stories, learn from my mistakes. And I think the fact that you already are thinking of these things and this concept of doing less but doing those things more at such a young age in high school is amazing.
Love it. And having just analyzed your activity sheet and college application in a sea of hundreds of college applications that I analyzed, I didn't even remember that you did tennis. So brings the point home even further. It wasn't one of the standouts. But maybe it made you healthy and happy. Every activity plays its purpose. So on a related note, you've talked about, I was worried about what colleges would think. A big tension parents here navigate and students is doing what's authentic to them and that feeling at tension or at odds with what will get them into the best college. how college oriented were each of you? Was Northwestern, Harvard, and Yale top of mind for each of you? Was that driving your decisions? And how would you advise folks, whether they're kids not thinking about college at all or they're college obsessed, to find the healthy middle ground?
I'm happy to kick off with this one because actually my 10th grade year, I remember being in the library after I got a bad grade on a test, and I looked my best friend in the eyes and I said, I'm never going to college. Like, I'm not even, like, why even bother? Like, it's not gonna happen for me. Like, I was kind of so, I guess, convinced that all of the people who were getting into these really stellar, amazing schools were so superhuman that it wasn't even an option for me. And if you walk away with one thing from this call, is that all the people in these schools are normal kids who just had something that they cared a lot about and could communicate it well in an application. And that can be you too tomorrow, today. Like, that is you right now, right? Even if you're someone who has the dedication to listen to a call like this, right? So I think in the beginning, I was like, I wasn't necessarily super hyper focused on college. I think my 9th grade year, I was a little bit more like, oh, like I have to do all of these things to get into college. And it was very freeing to enter a mindset of, you know what, I'm just going to do what I care about. I'm going to do what passes the 3 a.m. test. And, you know, whatever else emerges from that is what I'm supposed to do. Because I think the other thing you have to remember is if you are someone who decides to spend your entire life dedicating yourself to things that you think will get into college, what happens after you get in, right? You have a life to live afterwards. You have a career to build, and you want to do things that you could genuinely see yourself continuing. So another question I'd ask, if you're kind of wondering, is this authentic to me? Do I really love it? Do I really want to stick with it? Is this something I would do whether or not I went to the college of my dreams? Is this something I would care about whether or not I got into X, Y, or Z school? And if you're still feeling that kind of passion and commitment towards these things, if you would do it anyway, then I think that's an excellent choice. And in terms of how that's perceived by colleges, I've been an interviewer this past year for Harvard admissions. And one thing I can tell you for sure, for certain, is that it is very, very obvious if something is deeply, like if you're deeply passionate about something or if you're just checking a box. It shows in the way that you tell your stories. It shows up in your essays. And I can tell you that schools care 1,000% more about how you're pursuing something rather than what it is that you're doing. So don't try to put yourself in these boxes. It can be Pokemon cards. I know someone asked about that in our last session. It could be matcha, it could be anything. But if you're demonstrating that you deeply care and you're willing to put in the time, energy, and effort to kind of build upon your skill set or your interest, then I think that's something that's really positive for colleges to see.
Love that, 100%. I'll leave it if Zoe or Micah want to add anything.
Yeah, I can take it. I'll just say there is 100% a reason why when Curious Cardinals reached out and said, hey, like we want pictures of things you did in high school. There's a reason why all 5 pictures I submitted are a band and marching band and orchestra. And I'm not a music major at Yale. You know, there was a time in high school when I was like, oh, maybe conservatory, maybe music school. Ended up realizing that's kind of not exactly what I wanted to do. But the things that I stressed the most about in high school, as far as what's gonna get me into college, you know, what nonprofit should I create, what passion project should I pursue? Once again, after talking to the teachers who wrote my rec letters, and after talking to people like Audrey and people like my admissions officers, those things are 100% full stop not what got me into any college ever. What did was, I mean, I'll tell you now, on my Common App activity sheet, the first one was marching band. And I think for a lot of people, like I've told my friends at Yale, they're like, what do you mean? Like, why was it not your nonprofit? Like, you know, all of these, why was it not your nonprofit, your passion project? I think it was just so apparent, even to myself, that like what I loved and where I had my people and my community. So much so that even, like I said, my marching band best friends are still my best friends to this day, 2 years later. It was just so clear that that's what I loved. And I knew, like, even if I try to like hide it or replace my ultimate passion of band and music and, you know, the French horn with something else, like I can't hide that from the teachers writing my rec letters. I can't hide that from the interview that I'm about to go into, like Nala mentioned. I can't hide it from the supplemental essays I'm going to write. Like, I just knew, to be super blunt, I was so much of a band nerd that I couldn't hide it. And so I think when you have that level of passion, it's just like embrace it and just show it to people and like be like radically honest about it. Um,
And Micah,
yeah, so I would say that
what was your Common App essay on?
it was on music.
And I say
Um,
that because a common, I would say, myth is folks say don't write your Common App essay on what's already all over your application. And I've had the privilege of reading Micah's Common App essay, which was about his love for music. And my Common App essay was about my love for running, and running was all over my activity sheet. And it's about, as you said, leaning into what you're actually a crazy nerd over, and that's typically rewarded in this process, not only in this process, but it's also what leads to more fulfillment and engagement in what you're doing in life. Um, so let's shift gears a little bit to that end as I ask about Common App to telling your story and a little bit later on in the high school journey. There's a buzzword folks talk about all the time, which is what's your narrative? We in the FlightPlan product call it your themes. And I think that what I like to say to students is that think of themes or your narrative as a framework. It can be a series of things that drive you, it could be your North Star, and it shouldn't limit you, but hopefully it helps make a decision. Does this fit within this broader umbrella, which is like the series of my things? And my things could be super interdisciplinary, it could be a combination of things most people don't even put in one sentence. I'm curious, at what point did you feel like you could articulate your themes, your narrative, and what do you think is valuable about that for high schoolers to reconcile with versus what can be distracting or perhaps counterproductive?
Ooh, if I may jump in. I remember because I wrote it on my Common App, and since I was able to articulate it, it has been my North Star, like through all of college and even after. And that is, I realized why I loved science and why I loved theater so much is because I flipping love people. I love talking about them. I love talking to them, meeting them, all of that stuff. And I wrote this line that said, actually, theater and neuroscience are the same thing. But theater examines the human condition in the abstract, and neuroscience examines the human condition in the data-based and empirical. And that actually ended up being my whole platform for my advocacy as well, right? A lot of people are like, oh, that's too sciency, or oh, that's too artsy. I'm like, no, no, no. They're all one thing and they're all in the service of people. So it's okay to kind of like, flounder a little bit, being like, I like these two things, but I don't really know why. But once you find that, and I recommend that you really start asking yourself that question now, because it'll fit in with all of these different aspects of your personality. I've always been an extrovert. I've always been outgoing. I'll always make friends anywhere I go. It will be so invaluable, not only to have that like tied up in a bow line for your application, but that will stay with you throughout whatever you end up doing. And whatever I have ended up doing, whether it be teaching theater science, it has been in the service of people. So to do that digging now is going to be super amazing because it won't be limiting. It'll be freeing because you'll be able to say when somebody asks you, what are you about? You'll be able to say this, and that'll be awesome.
Could not agree more. Even when I pivoted from thinking I was the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg to Curious Cardinals, it was my underlying North Star, my passion. And that's passion is what gets me through the hard times. That's what Angela Duckworth describes as grit. Grit equals passion plus perseverance. So love that. Nala and Mike, I'm curious if you heard that term or how you came to telling your story or connecting, identifying the kind of connective tissue.
I'm happy to add on just because you finished talking about asking yourself the right questions now. And this was actually the moment where I figured out what on earth I was going to write about. This is a very common tale in my life, I guess, but I started off very lost. I was freaking out the summer before my senior year because I didn't know what to write about. I like had no idea. I knew it needed to be unique and all these other abstract ways to describe a Common App. So I started doing one thing that like changed the course of my writing trajectory, which was I put a notepad by my bed, and as soon as my alarm went off in the morning, I would answer the question, I would not be me without. And sometimes those answers were really silly. Sometimes the answer was that my favorite soda is Dr. Pepper. That was really important to me. It was also really important to me that I loved baking bread and a lot of other things that ultimately became themes that appeared in my essays. I wrote about how baking bread to me felt a lot like public service, and it was part of the reason I woke up every morning to do it because I got to serve my siblings the way that I felt public service was important to me. I wrote about how Dr. Pepper was invented in Texas, which is a super diverse state, and how Dr. Pepper has 23 different flavors, and how diversity was really important to me, and it became a core of my advocacy. So I think when you start asking yourself the question, what do people need to know about me to know me, or what do my closest friends know about me, it starts to unveil some deeper truths about who you are and how all of these things come together. When I first looked at the notepad and saw bread, I did not see public service. But when I started to ask myself, how do these really important key core parts of my personality connect to other things that I value a lot, that's when I started to uncover those kind of like through lines, like Zoe was saying. So if you really are stuck and like you need a place to start, I would say, tapping into your half conscious mind is a really great shortcut to kind of getting to some of those things that are either constantly on your mind or things that you're always talking about with your family and friends.
Love it. I'd love to hear by the time you got to senior year, because I would say I'm trying to cover it all for the broad swath of folks we have from ninth graders to rising seniors. How did you figure out where you wanted to apply to college? I would say that that's perhaps arguably the most strategic part of it all, because it's deciding where you want to place your early decision application, which does extremely increase your likelihood of admission. So I'm curious, like, how did you decide where you'd apply early? Is where you applied early where you ended up? And what questions did you ask? What pros and cons list? How did you think about that process? And what advice would you share to others who are in that August before senior year, thick of it all, trying to navigate these critical decisions?
Yeah, I can hop in. I think that if possible, applying early is 100% full stop the best thing you can do, especially because if you get into that college that you know you want to go to, maybe even it's an early decision, so it's binding. So if you get in early, you kind of have to go there. Um, it makes your spring semester of your senior year of high school the best time of your life because you know where you're going to be in 6 months. You can just finally live. If you've been stressing about college for the past, what, 7 semesters, now is your chance to like, okay, like smell the roses, soak it in. Because it's the last, semester that you'll have like back at home. Maybe, you never know. Um, the biggest piece of advice I can give people is if possible, and if you're able to, tour and visit as many colleges as possible. And if possible, try to do that in person. The online webinars, those are great. You can learn a lot. You can hear from students, but nothing rivals, nothing matches putting yourself like on the ground and walking where you would walk as a student. Um, the kind of like my story goes that I was dying to go to Harvard. I was like, oh my gosh, like Harvard is going to be it. I knew I was interested in government. And my parents were like, nah, I'm from North Carolina. They're like, you need to stay in the South. Like, I think Duke's going to be it. And so I like finally convinced my parents my spring break of my junior year of high school. I drugged them up all the way up to the Northeast. And we did a bunch of different schools. We did Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Georgetown. Um, and I wasn't falling in love with anything. And we actually ended up doing Harvard and Yale on the same day. And so we were in Cambridge, and then it's just 2 hour drive back down to New Haven. And it sounds so cliche and it sounds so cheesy. And I promise you it's the truth, even though it doesn't sound like it. But it was one of those moments where I stepped out. It was on Tower Parkway, Yale University's campus. And we walked around for 10 minutes. And I just like had this feeling, if I can get in here in the next 6 months, like this is where I want to be for the next 4 years, if not longer. Um, and like the bells and Harkness Tower were ringing out across campus. It was a Friday afternoon. We were walking. My mom was doing the mom thing and taking pictures of literally everything. And so like we were blocking up this entire pathway, and I was like apologizing to the students who we were blocking, and they were talking to us. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like if this is a place where people are brilliant, but also so kind and compassionate, they would stop and talk to strangers. This is where I want to be. And so anyways, that's just a small anecdote of if you can get yourself on campus and immerse yourself in the community that your eventual college is, then do it.
Quick clarifying question, because you just said 6 months. I'm assuming you were touring summer before senior year. When were these tours? I think that's another important thing, because we have parents who want to go tour 10th grade a little bit too early in the journey to have earned the right to spend your precious time touring. Summer after junior year, perfect timing. Love that.
100%. Because, students change, high schoolers change. I totally don't think that I would have fallen in love with Yale if I had toured, the summer after my freshman or sophomore year. There's
You were
something
busy.
about
You were
junior.
doing a lot of things.
Oh, totally, yes. And there's also something about junior spring break, junior summer, where the thought of college starts to it's you're staring it in the face. And so you really have to start thinking like, what do I want? Like, yeah, this is college, but it's me living in an entirely different location with an entirely different group of people for the next 4 years. So that's a really good point, Audrey, about the timing.
Nala and
Yeah,
Zoe, yeah, go for it, Zoe.
yeah. One of the things, full disclosure, I did not apply to Northwestern early decision, but one of the things that really um, influenced my decision to end up going there. I knew that they had this whole slogan at the time. It said, "And is in our DNA." I see Jules laughing because she knows. Because their whole thing is that you can double major in basically literally anything. One of my best friends was an engineering and cello major. And not only do they allow it, they really encourage it and structured their entire school system such that you could do that and be excellent at both things. So that was super duper attractive. But a lot of things are attractive on paper, right? So I didn't say that I knew for sure that it was going to be my home until I had gotten in. And I was class of 2020 in high school. So my spring semester was not the best time of my life, unfortunately, because we were all quarantined. But we all had these group chats of like accepted students. And I remember just like literally like laughing out loud and being so inspired by the people who were in the Northwestern accepted students group chat that I was like, I see myself dorming with any of these people. I see myself getting cheese fries late at night, 11 p.m., studying in the library, and also starting nonprofits together and doing student productions in a random shack behind the student center as you do. And I think that is at the end of the day, I think a lot of campuses are beautiful. And dining hall food is kind of bad everywhere. And you're going to have rainy days and weird Midwestern weather. But who are the people who you are going to want to brave that entire experience with? I think that at the end of the day should be the guiding factor between which schools you choose. Because at the end of the day, every school is going to have pros and cons. But who you surround yourself with is who you are going to become. So when you leave that beautiful campus, who and what are you going to take with you? I think that should be your priority.
Love it. And Nala, what about you? Did you apply early to Harvard? How did you decide? Was that a challenging process for you? How did you think? Did it feel like a strategic decision?
Yeah. I did apply early to Harvard, and echoing the 10th grade point, when I was in the 10th grade, I made this spreadsheet and it had 200 schools in it. And it had like 15 columns of all these different things that I was looking for in schools. I was like really psyching myself out about it. And I want to emphasize to everyone on this call that it really didn't get me anywhere. I still hadn't decided I was going to apply to Harvard early by that point. And I think that you can really kind of think through a lot of the core things that are important to you, and that's important. But I think the points that these two have hit on so far about, the other, I suppose, slightly more intangible aspects of these campuses is actually where the decision making happens. And I'd been in boarding school in the Northeast at Exeter, so about 40 minutes outside of Boston. And I actually used to compete at Harvard Model United Nations, which sounds really silly, but I promise this is relevant. Because that conference happens every year in February, which, for those of you who know New England, know that is possibly the worst weather month to exist on the planet for New England. Like, it's bad, right? And I think what it taught me is going every single winter in the middle of the winter, like my legs are covered in snow, is that all of these schools are going to have the most beautiful brochures you have ever seen in your life. They're going to highlight the highlights as much as they possibly can. But what you also want to consider for yourself is, where would you want to be on your worst day? And that's actually what made the difference for me in terms of deciding to apply to Harvard. Similar to Micah, I'd done Yale Young Global Scholars, so I thought Yale was going to be it for me, funnily enough. And I did a bunch of different Zoom calls with different Harvard and Yale students. I really got the student perspective, and I was thinking about, where would I want to be on like a really bad day where the weather sucks? I've had a terrible, terrible class. And for me, the answer became, I wanted to be at our Institute of Politics. Like, I wanted to be in the Kennedy School, which is our graduate school of government. If I had to be crying after a test, that's where I'd want to do it. And I'd want to do it on the shoulders of people who were coming to give insane and excellent talks and had this really awesome government kind of supplementary component to campus. I wanted to do it in a place where I could hop on a train and like be in a different place really fast, and Boston and Cambridge are really well connected. So it actually became not necessarily the highlights that were my decision-making factors, but kind of considering some of the more challenging components of the college experience and what that would look like for me on different campuses, and what supports I would lean on, what would really make the difference on those really terrible winter, February, cold, snowy Boston days.
Love it. Brief kind of rapid round before, and parents, students, whoever's here today, feel free to write your questions in the chat. You can DM me any questions, or you can write questions publicly or raise your hand. So we're gonna open it up to questions from the group after this one. We're gonna do just a few rapid fire, and I got the privilege of hearing this from some of you. Rapid fire, what was your Common App essay on? Micah, since we already covered it, you start us off.
Sure, yeah. So I wrote about music, shocker. And I kind of framed it as like a two truths and a lie type thing. So I basically told like three small anecdotes of music in my life from high school. And looking back, it's so cheesy, but I guess it worked. I was like playing two truths and a lie with the admissions officer, and I was like, which of these three is the lie? And then at the end, I was like, oh, surprise, none of them are, because music is like what I do and my thing. I think more importantly though, I like said some totally kind of embarrassing and shared some embarrassing anecdotes. Like for example, and Audrey probably knows this after reading it. One of the things I talked about was like conducting and being drum major and like influencing the music and listening to music. And I did this really weird thing in high school where I would be driving down the road in my car from, church to orchestra, band to work, whatever. And instead of listening to Taylor Swift or Noah Kahan, which you can maybe find me doing now, I would listen to like high school band music, and I would like conduct one arm on the wheel, and then like my free arm was going. And I like shared that. And I remember talking to my admissions officer, and that's one of the things he remembered. So TLDR, put it all out there. If it's embarrassing, they don't care.
Cool. I can go next. My Common App essay was about how I had taught myself Portuguese, because it was my father's first language. He was a Brazilian, or his parents were Brazilian immigrants, and how essentially I had like been looking for all of these ways to like connect with my family, like specifically my father, like whether that be through like theater, or like I can do essentially like Shakespeare. I can do like the highest form of English language, and yet I still feel like I'm missing a way to communicate, like literally just like to open my heart to somebody. And then how eventually like it ended up becoming a thing that like my father and I really bonded over, because his Portuguese was really rusty. And then my entire family essentially like started relearning Portuguese because we had been like Americanized over 2 generations. And then how at Thanksgiving we're like, all right, we're just gonna speak in Portuguese. And it was kind of a silly story. It was not anything that necessarily was like super impressive, right? Like I wasn't a Portuguese whiz who then wrote a book in Portuguese or anything like that. But my relationship with my family was like very important to me. And it was not, again, anything that was like life changing to anybody but me, but it was very life changing to me. And it changed the dynamic of my immediate community, which was my family. So yeah, going back, I don't know if I would write about the same thing, but I think it was very, very personal, which I think they really resonated with, and very vulnerable as well. So don't be afraid of that.
And I wrote mine about baking bread. So over COVID, I became obsessed with baking bread. Like my parents were so annoyed because we had to buy special pans with holes in them so the baguettes would get really crispy, and like all of these little things. I got super, super into the specifics of it. So I wrote about how I thought baking was kind of like public service, but also how the most important thing about baking is that it takes time. I wrote about how I actually like got really, really frustrated in the political world because I wanted to do everything so fast. I was like, why can I not change the world in a day? Like, what is going on here? And I wrote about how I had done all these like global, national, international things, but the thing that brought me the most value was actually like some of the really small actions on my campus. So I did a number of like benefit concerts in high school, and talking about how kind of seeing those performances kind of reminded me, you know what, like sometimes you really do just have to slow down a little bit in life, kind of like when you're baking. And it is a lesson that I have to remind myself of constantly still to this day. But I think demonstrating that growth with a couple of my different passions folded into one essay was very kind of like full circle for me as a high school student.
I love it. And I think that's such a great note to wrap this up on before we open it up to the group, because your stories are not adding more accolades to your resume. That's not the point. So much of this process is who you are as a human, and these are stories that illustrate who you are in a community, what you contribute, and your worldview, which is what you'll bring to a campus community. So Nyasa just asked, hi, how can you start making a passion project? What age is appropriate? How many months do you need with Curious Cardinals to create one? I'll just give a brief high-level answer, and then would love any of you who've done passion projects with students to talk about it. Curious Cardinals mentorship is K through 12, predominantly 7th to 12th, but we have a lot of precocious lower schoolers. And the earlier we start, the more malleable you are, and the more we can shape kind of your future trajectory. The flight plan is for 9th to 11th graders, but Curious Cardinals mentorship, you can do at any age. Passion projects, I'd sign up for a consultation call with someone on our team. The family admissions teams are all former educators, so they've worked with students themselves and will ask you a lot of questions to understand your goals, your interests, who your dream mentor is. And the month timeline will depend based on the goal. But if you want to do something like publish research, it will also depend on, do you come in knowing what you want to conduct research on? Do you come in having no idea what you want to publish research on? That in itself might take 2 to 3 months of discovery, learning the principles of how to conduct research, the different methodology, all the way to identifying publications to try to get it published could take anywhere from 6 to 24 months. It really depends based on the goal, based on where your student is at in the journey. And that's the type of work that we do in a consultation call to identify the best mentor match for you and set you up for success. And in terms of what age is appropriate, again, lots of students start early, and it's amazing that that's part of their identity at an early age. And I would say it's really formative for high schoolers to be able to work on a passion project for, say, the 4 years of their journey. Something we talk about a lot is in the activity sheet when you apply to college, you list all your activities, and you don't know at the onset, but it asks you how many years, how many months, how many weeks, how many hours per week, and no one tells you that it's really important to probably do 2 or 4 things for the 4 years of your high school journey and really go deep with them. And so a passion project can be kind of like the capstone project for a student to do across their 4 years of their high school journey. Maybe freshman year starting broad and trying to figure it out, and then finding out what you really want to do by the end of it, and then doubling down and growing that throughout your high school journey. But I'd love, if for our mentors here, if any of you have done a passion project, to speak a little bit to how it's worked and what it's like.
Yeah, I guess I just want to echo that. I think a huge part of the process is reflection. And exactly like you said, there is no one size fits all strategy. I'll give one example. A recent example is, I mentioned, I spent this past year working at an entrepreneurship center. So I do this both inside and outside of Curious Cardinals. But one of my most recent students, we were working on some entrepreneurship work related to your interest in housing development and urban development in general. And we spent like a good couple of months just doing some mapping exercises, doing some brainstorming, understanding the ecosystem of where she was at. So I think there's a really huge kind of like learning curve when it comes to developing not only kind of what do I care about, but where exactly specifically is my space to make a difference. And when you're younger and we're thinking about age appropriate, maybe that's not necessarily like publishing PhD level work when you're like 11, but taking the time to identify where there's an opportunity. So sometimes that means I'm going to go to a public meeting, I'm going to hear what they're talking about, and I'm actually going to take the time to really understand the space I'm stepping into. And for that reason, it can take longer or it can take shorter if you have existing experience. So for this specific student, it took a number of kind of public meetings that she was going to, sitting down and having these informative interviews with people in her space before she identified an internship and research opportunity that made a lot of sense for her. And I think if I had to like boil it down to one really key thing that you should take away with you, is that a lot of the time in Curious Cardinals, I think we think about skill sets and interest areas and how we can combine those to make a project that makes sense for you. So that can take a number of months, but that's kind of basic strategy that I use with a lot of my students.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I noticed we're almost at time, so Jules, we're gonna wrap up. There's a few folks asking some questions in the chat, which mentors you're welcome to answer. One of which was about if I'm passionate about something but don't think I'm that good at it, should I do it? And if you take anything away from this session today, it's hopefully that you should 100% do what you're passionate about and lean all into it. That is what it will be celebrated and rewarded, not only in college admissions, but in living a rewarding life. But I'll let any of our mentors who have any other thoughts reply in the chat. So how do we at Curious Cardinals support students? There's a few key ways. One is through our mentorship. These are 3 of our amazing mentors who work with students who are so lucky to learn from them. Through mentorship, we have passion projects and academic mentorship. Academic mentorship is like tutoring, but we say tutoring is the T word at Curious Cardinals. It has a connotation of being transactional, a remedy for Friday's test. This is not only about acing Friday's test. This is about learning the content, learning the executive functioning skills to thrive in life. And we match you to a mentor you look up to, you see yourself in, who you really connect with. Passion projects are our main offering at Curious Cardinals. We identify what you're interested in, what your goals are. Some students coming in saying, I want to build a drone. Other students say, I love climate change. What can I do with that interest? And we'll identify the best mentor based on where you're at in your journey to help you bring that goal to life through something tangible. These tracks typically fall into building a portfolio, like an engineering portfolio, conducting research, scientific research like renewable battery alternatives, maybe historical research, launching an organization, maybe that's a nonprofit you start, a club you start, a teaching organization, or content creation. We have students who are running blogs, who are starting podcasts, so many different shapes and forms. So you sign up for a consultation call with our team, we match your student to a mentor, and your mentor's goal is to help bring out your best self, be an aspirational near-peer role model, and help you achieve your goals. The other platform that we have at Curious Cardinals, which again, we're opening up next week, in addition to Curious Cardinals mentorship, is called the FlightPlan. So many families ask us for college help, and for a while we've stayed away from it. Our mentors are extraordinary young people with a lot of wisdom to share about college, but they are not college counselors. They're here to be positive role models who bring out the best in your student and show your student what's possible. But if you're looking for the best competitions, internships, summer programs, awards, a data-driven objective overview of where your student actually falls, guidance on how to help them distill what their themes are, accountability and project management to distill the task in addition to the human support. The FlightPlan is what we built because for 6 years, it's what we felt has been missing and no human can do, and it allows our mentors to do what they do best, which is inspire and motivate and build really meaningful connections with students. So if you are a high schooler navigating the college process or asking these questions, we reopen a week from today. You can sign up and have an initial intake call, but that's a little bit of the ways we help students at Curious Cardinals. And again, our bigger picture goal is to help students find their purpose and the pathway to get there. And we're so lucky to have amazing mentors like Zoe. I was about to combine your names, Zoe, Micah, and Nala, who epitomize what everyone wants their kids to be: passionate, curious, purposeful, and really impactful in the work they do. So thank you guys so much for your time and for your authenticity and wisdom. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're so grateful for your thoughtfulness. And as I like to say, if you were a parent, your kid might not thank you today, but they will thank you one day. And hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.